Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back. As you know, we've been doing these roundtables every single day. And the purpose of them is to understand what is in these bills that the Democrats have for reconciliation. Because if you go back to what Pelosi said years ago, you have to pass them to know what's in them. And it's the same thing that's happening right now. But if people understood what were in these bills, they would never pass. But one of the issues that I really want to talk about today, we've had some great policy discussions earlier that the Democrats have been pushing, but what they've been pushing so far has been making life more expensive. And there's nothing that's becoming more expensive than gasoline today. And it doesn't have to be the case. And when gasoline becomes more expensive, the people that it truly hurts are those that are less fortunate, those that have less money. And it literally takes food out of their children. It takes the ability away for them to go to Disneyland and others. And for those who work and travel, especially for myself in the Central Valley, it's disproportionate punishment. But the other thing that is happening here, why the price of gasoline for the first time in the last 7 years to hit an average about $3 a gallon, and I happen to be from California, there's places that hit $7. It's averaging over $4.50. And that's a real hurt, especially with what they have done with inflation and everything else that we're purchasing. So everything's becoming more expensive. As we look to Thanksgiving coming up, this is going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving in history for Americans. But the real challenge that's happening here is it doesn't have to be. It's the policies of this new administration. It's being compounded inside this reconciliation bill. And what that means to my district, to your district, to others, is people are out of work. They're getting jobs to end because you look at the policies of the crushing new cost on domestic producers, shutting down federal lands. That hurts the schools in New Mexico and everywhere else. So what I would really like to see, and I've watched the president just on CNN when he was asked this question. And Biden says that higher prices could last for a while. He told CNN, I don't have a near-term answer. It's going to be hard. Well, it's not hard because America can be energy independent. And when America is energy independent, not only are the gas prices lower, but it's better for our environment. But the other part is the world is safer and more people are working. We're more prosperous as we go through. But we've got a number of members here today that have a lot of different pieces of legislation. I know, Garret, you have a bill to improve the NEPA permitting process. Yvette, you've got a bill to require congressional approval to prohibit new fossil fuel production leases. Pete Stauber's in. He has a bill to create common sense reforms on the permitting process for critical mineral projects that are really what we need as we walk through. So a lot of the Republican solutions to unlock this problem going forward, but our biggest challenge right now is this bill will compound some of the ideas of coming out of the Biden administration. We've watched in such a short time our prices get higher. We watched the president start out, stop a pipeline, but allow Russia to have a pipeline. We've watched, and Garret Graves has been great about this, we've watched the Democrats when they fight our ability to have pipelines. Now, on the East Coast, they're bringing Russian natural gas to America. Okay, that's not just jobs. You know what it means if you want to talk to the environment? And Garrett's told me many times before, American natural gas is 42% cleaner than Russian natural gas. We should not only be supplying it to America, we could supply it to the world because we're so abundant in all of this. We've got a lot of people up on Zoom, from Erin with the president of Robinson Oil, Dave Knorr, who is my dear friend, who is mayor of Taft. He has a crane service business, but he has been in the energy business for quite some time, and he's got a great story. It's gone viral where these environmentalists came into the community, and they had like this blimp or balloon thing out there, and he went out and just debated them on the issue. You know, everything that they use about petroleum is in there. And he's just been such a great leader. We've got Scott Daniel with Young Commercial Transfer. He's actually a constituent of mine. Ray Miller, the mayor, with Yvette, Mila, and Emmons are going to be here as well. So what I'd like to do is let's go around the room here. You all have been leaders on this subject. Let's talk a little bit, have a discussion. Let's open it up for those who are on Zoom as well, and then we've got press in the room too, and we'll take some questions. But Garret, let's start off with you. You've been a leader in this industry.
Thank you. You know, what we're seeing right now across the United States is we're seeing record gasoline prices. We're seeing record prices to heat and cool our homes. everything that we're experiencing right now was predicted, and it could have been prevented. California is one state that the governor there has tried to lean forward on these climate issues. Look at what we've seen. We've seen some of the greatest growth of emissions. We've seen some of the highest prices, including gasoline prices, averaging between $1.50 and $1.80, higher per gallon than in my home state, per gallon. Electricity rates higher, most dependent state on foreign energy, least reliable grid. Why in the world would you take a record like that and say, oh, we're going to apply this to the other 49 states? Meanwhile, our own White House is out there saying we're going to shut down pipeline projects in the United States, which I remind you, National Research Council has found the safest way to transport energy, lowest emissions, less opportunity for spills. Shutting down pipelines in the United States only to treat Russia differently and say, no, Vladimir Putin, we're going to facilitate you building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Shutting down energy production in the states that we all represent in the United States, yet turning to countries like Russia, Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and asking through this OPEC plus request, our very own White House, asking them to produce more energy. So our request here is ultimately, treat us like you're treating other countries. Allow us to produce our own energy solutions right here in the United States. Allow us to use our own pipeline resources right here in the United States where we have less dependence upon foreign energy sources. We can use our own resources here that are proven to be clean, and we'll have less expensive prices. So all of this is preventable, and just asking us, treat America like you're treating other countries.
That would be so nice. Yvette, you represent New Mexico. New Mexico is an energy-producing state, but it's also on federal land. And when the president came in and stopped the ability to have leases on the federal lands, it not only just hurt the jobs, but it hurt your schools for the royalties and the revenues. But you've been such a fighter on this.
Well, and it's true. I mean, New Mexico is kind of a checkerboard, if you will, of property. And most of our drilling, in fact, over 50% of our oil and over 60% of our natural gas comes off of federal land. So, of course, we've got state land, private land. But this is huge for New Mexico. Over 40% of our state budget relies heavily on the oil and gas industry. But it's not just the budget. And what I think people, they don't really think about too often, and I'm sure the mayor of Artesia can speak to this, but these are communities. We have two of the biggest oil-producing counties in the country. And this setback for them, it just proves that this government is unsustainable as it relates to making good decisions when it comes to energy. Because, as you just said, Garret, we're not treating our business owners, we're not treating the American producer or the employee as we are other nations, and that just simply makes people not want to invest in the energy when we know for a fact that they can produce it cleaner, more affordably, than any other country. And yet here we're going to put ourselves at the risk of buying energy from our adversaries. It makes no sense at all. But I really am excited about the kids in our state, because I just recently spoke to the seniors at Artesia High School. They get it. I mean, their parents are employed in the industry. It's hotels, it's restaurants, it's the schools. It's just a ripple effect. And I think these are also the things that we need to be talking about more openly, because it's not just one industry. It's one industry plus thousands of employees, thousands of families, and thousands of people all over the country.
Now, Stephanie, you just got elected from Oklahoma, and you literally campaigned telling people what would happen if the Democrats were successful and won, and you won a seat based taking a Democrat, and much of your campaign, I remember watching it, it was literally workers in the oil field. This has been their way of life. This is what they've been able to produce in Oklahoma.
That's exactly right. I was a state legislator prior to being elected, and approximately 25% of our state's revenue comes from the oil and gas industry. So the fees, taxes, and regulations that this administration is looking to levy impact every single piece of Oklahoma. Interestingly enough, in recent years, federal lands have supplied approximately 19% of the natural gas and 22% of the oil for the entire country. So to your point, we were talking earlier about this being a tax on low-income families. When you start pulling that supply, and right now we're going into the winter months where it's going to be cold and we're going to need natural gas, you're going to increase heating costs for every low-income family. So not only are we seeing inflation in, groceries and gasoline, but we're going to see it in home heating as well. And this continuation of what I would consider to be sort of an assault on the industry is going to have a rippling effect. And we need to be mindful about looking at how do we address this long term. In Oklahoma, the Oklahoma State University recently opened an innovation center, and we're looking at how do we use technology and innovation to actually drive down cost and still protect the environment, because I think we all can agree we want to be mindful of that. That's important. But you can't do it at the expense of every American.
But we have found, and Garret can give you all the stats, we have lowered our CO2 emissions more than any of the countries combined, and we did that while we were increasing our production to become energy independent. We can have both. And when you do that, the price of gasoline is lower. And in this new bill that they want to go forward, it has arbitrary drilling moratoriums on federal lands, it increases fees and royalties, and you already just now have gas at one of its highest levels that will only go higher if this passes. Then they go after the ability for our critical minerals. When you talk about royalties and the ability to develop copper and other mines, I mean, this is one of the things you campaigned on because you watched prior what the Democrat policies did to northern Minnesota.
Yeah, Leader McCarthy, thanks for holding this. And to my colleagues, it's great to be in this fight with you. You talk about winter. I have constituents that are going to deal with 40 below weather for weeks at a time, and they're going to pay 54% more for natural gas. That's an attack on our rail, an attack on the middle class.
Right, that's right.
And we talk about energy independence. We talked about the Republican. We support energy independence, energy dominance, and mining dominance. And Leader McCarthy, you talked about mining. I just want to shift gears. Last Tuesday, the Department of Defense says we need to mine more minerals. And on Wednesday, they put forth a mining ban, a study, 2-year study, to take mining of the biggest copper nickel find in North America off the grid for 20 years. When we need more of it. If we're going to adapt to alternative sources of energy, we need that.
It gives China an advantage.
It's an absolute, it gives China smiling all the way to the bank. And we have, being the top republic on energy and minerals resources, we see this every week. We deal with it every single week on the stopping of this industry, the keep it in the ground mentality. It's strong, it's well funded, and we have to fight back because this is an attack on the middle class. Make no mistake about it. The middle class is going to pay more for gas at the pump, more for natural gas, and more for our commodities that we use every day. And it's really an assault on America, the blue-collar worker, and the union workers that support me in northeastern Minnesota. And I'm happy to have be here with you all. And it was great to go to your New Mexico and see the oil well being tapped by the Bureau of Land Management and doing it right. And these are all success stories. Kevin, you brought the fact that we do it better with reduction of carbons. If you want to reduce carbons, you buy critical minerals, mining, components, rare earths done in the United States of America. You purchase oil that is from the United States, and it's with the best environmental standards and the best labor standards in the world. Right. And this president is doing just the opposite.
And I would add to that, you talked about mining and minerals. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, this is actually a national security issue at this point. When you, prohibit mining for these rare earth minerals, then you're looking at reducing the amount of availability for semiconductors or microchips or all the things that we rely on for every day. That's exactly right.
We're watching. And when I sit back and look at the supply chain out of California, look at all those ships, this is how I look at it. First of all, it's not just a port problem. Why are we bringing all these products in from other countries? Why isn't it America making these products and these ships are going out? It's because of what's happening like in this bill itself. So we're more reliant upon other countries instead of being in America. And now he's just imposed this on energy in America so the prices are higher when we could be energy independent, more jobs. And I want to turn, we've got a lot of great guests on here and we want to add them into. Erin is president of the Robinson Oil Corporation. They also own a local chain of gas stations in the Bay Area. If I think of any place that's probably more difficult, it's got to be the Bay Area, and I'm from California. But they're called Rotten Robbie. Erin, you want to give us a little perspective on what you're seeing, not only from the oil corporation, but from your local chain of gas stations?
Yeah, we're a fourth generation family-owned company and operate only in Northern California. And while I certainly believe that we need to take action towards climate change, I'm not sure I have confidence in the plan put forth to get there. Like what's been said, the price of fuel is factored into everything, all your Amazon deliveries, your groceries, your travel. Here in California, we already pay $1.20 plus in taxes and carbon credit reduction programs and other fees. And so a lot of stations in our state are close, if not above $5 a gallon at this point. We've already seen refiners move out of the state or reduce production, and that increases costs and causes a fair amount of supply issues during different times of the year. So we believe, pushing oil extraction or fuel production outside the U.S. will only kind of exacerbate that problem. We feel we're being pushed very strongly towards electric, and we don't believe the current infrastructure can even support that. Certainly not freight and agriculture. So we really, our industry, certainly in California, but overall, it's pretty nervous about where things are going.
Erin, you raised a good point about pushing towards electric. In their bill, they actually increase. So if you make $800,000 a year, government will subsidize your ability to buy an electric car, but only if it's built in a union shop. But then they raise the prices you're seeing every day above $5 for the middle class that can't afford that expensive electric car. But now they can't even afford a new car with all the prices going up, but it's costing them more for their everyday way of life. I'm sure you're hearing this a lot in your stores from people coming in with fuel.
Yeah, and there's a lot of concern either from other people in our industry or our customers of how they're going to charge their vehicles, what price is that going to be. Currently we post our prices right on every street corner for good or for bad. So it's very transparent what someone's going to get charged. When you move into electric, I don't even know what it's costing me to have my lights on right this second, but I know what it's going to cost me per gallon to put in my car. So, we really have curiosity how that transparency is going to be towards the consumer once we go to electric as well.
Well, thank you, Erin. We have Dave Knorr. He happens to be the mayor of the city of Taft, but he also is the CEO and president of a crane service company that he's had. It's a family-owned business that he started up. And what I love to say, Taft is actually in my district. I come from a beautiful part of California. The only problem with the district is it's surrounded by California. But Dave, you have just been a leader in this. You want to give us some of your perspective?
Absolutely, Kevin. Welcome, everybody. Little background, a little history about the state of California. Just as recently as about 1988, the state of California only imported about 4.5% of all the oil that we consumed in our state. Last year, we imported over 70%. And if you're wondering what happens when you give up energy independence, that's what's going on. We raised this great big green flag. We're going green. We're saving the environment. Yet the state of California itself imports almost 60% of all the oil produced in Ecuador. That's in the Amazon rainforest portion of Ecuador. The Chinese are actually producing the oil for the NOC in Ecuador and then selling it to California. We willingly buy it. We are financing the destruction of the Amazon rainforest in that basin, the Amazon basin. It used to be a carbon sink. It has now become a net emitter of carbon dioxide. And our policies within the state of California are responsible for gas prices. It's not raw materials. I own a house in Bullhead City. I was there last weekend. At the end of my street in Bullhead City, I paid $2.92 a gallon for diesel fuel. They don't produce a lot of oil in Arizona, and they don't refine any of it. I crossed the Colorado River into Needles, California. That same $2.92 a gallon diesel fuel was $5.87 a gallon. Right here in the city of Taft, in Kern County, which once was the largest oil and gas producing county in the continental United States, right down the street, the price of diesel is 160% of what I paid last weekend in Arizona. Now, the negative costs and implications of the additional costs aren't just borne by the poor because, believe me, the the great transition, the just transition to renewables is going to be paid by people's discretionary income. So whether it's my budget and I'm not poor, but I'm not financially challenged, or somebody who is, it doesn't matter. When you think about your average family in the United States of America, they have a house to pay for, and they have a car and car insurance and health insurance and somebody's braces. Well, in the end, what's left over, their discretionary income, is what's going to fund this Green New Deal. And it's what's happening right now in the state of California. And here again, part of the hypocrisy of all of it is, on July the 30th, the governor of the state of California instructed California Department of Water to enter into contracts with General Electric to lease 5 more 30 megawatt turbines to produce electricity powered by natural gas. So since 1990, the state of California has installed thousands of gigawatts of both wind and solar energy capacity from an annual basis. We have registered over 700,000 plug-in vehicles. We've installed over 1 million solar roofs. The average mileage of all vehicles gone up about 25%. So all that low-hanging fruit is gone. And during the course of that same time period, Kevin, California has lowered their oil consumption by 6%. 6% with all of that cost and all of that work. So the fantasy that's being pushed that this transition, this elimination of oil and gas is going to take place over the course of a decade or 5 decades is just that. It's a fantasy, and fantasy does not fund government.
Mayor, you may want to brief everybody too about, the governor came out, we had a natural, almost affecting oil spill that bubbled up because of the pressure. And you spent a little time with him, but just educating him on places. And this is a concern I have because they don't really know all that goes into production, the security and safety of what we provide, but also what this petroleum production produces more than just gasoline. Tell us a little about the story of seeing him.
Okay, yes, sir. Like I said, Kevin, we met out there outside of McKittrick, California. There was a surface expression. There was some oil and produced water coming to the surface. And it was a big enough news story that the governor decided he needed to witness that for himself. And I spoke with Senator Grove about the fact he was coming to McKittrick. She said she was too busy to make the appointment, so asked that I go there, which I did. Now, they wouldn't let me in the news conference because I wasn't accredited media on the invitation list. And for heaven's sakes, the last thing you want is somebody asking a question of the governor that he has no idea of what the answer was. So after the news conference, his security detail took me to the back of the school, and I met with the governor for about 15 minutes. And when I asked him, he said, "Well, Mayor, what do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Well, sir, I've been in this industry for 4 decades. I know what is going on. What I want to know is, what did you see today?" And he started talking about, well, I learned that, there's different kinds of oil. I didn't know there was heavy oil that sat on the surface and light oil that permeated the ground. I didn't know you could recover it. But a lot of what he said was what he did not know. And I told the governor that. I said, "Governor, ignorance is not an insult, sir. It just simply means you haven't been exposed to the facts. And I'm here to expose you to the facts. I will help connect the dots for you so you understand the reality of the industry, whether it's local, regional, statewide, industry-wide, or global. But I am here for you." And he picked out his phone and he said, "Look, Mayor, I've got your contact information on my phone. The senator sent it to me." And I said, "Well, sir, that's your free ticket to the truth. You've got a whole staff that will fact check everything that I present you, and feel free to do it." And then, Kevin, a real funny story about what happened subsequent to that. Senator Grove asked that I continue to communicate with the governor about facts, bits. So send a couple of paragraphs every other day, and she would forward it to the governor. And so she did, and I did. Every other day, I'd send some information. She forwarded it to the governor, and the governor would send her back a text. "Got it. Thank you. Very interesting." Well, finally, I sent some information to him that caught his attention. And so Senator Grove called me just busting a gut laughing and said, "I got a phone call from the governor today. I've got to share with you. he called me and said, Senator Grove, that last bit of information you sent me regarding where California gets their oil and how much, where'd that come from? And the senator said, well, sir, it came from, Mayor Knorr, the guy that you met and spoke with in McKittrick, mayor of the city of Tops. And he said, okay, fine, but where did he get it? Questioning the credibility of the information. And she said, well, sir, if you'll go on www.ca.gov, the mayor took it from your state website, sir. It's all right there.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott Daniel, you co-own and president of Young's Commercial Transfer. You have one of the largest businesses up in Porterville, another part of the district, but you're kind of getting a hit on a couple different angles. Workforce, finding enough people that can move the product, drive, going up and down 99 and I-5. But now you're getting hit not just with inflation, but the price of fuel and the cost of moving these. Can you talk a little bit about what your struggles are as a small business?
Yes, afternoon, Congressman. We have a fourth generation business here in California also, and we are lucky enough to be here in the San Joaquin Valley, which actually feeds the nation. We actually send so many fruits, vegetables, and nut crops out of the state now that we really do feed a large portion of the nation. My company alone will burn over 3 million gallons of fuel this year. And with fuel being as high as it is now, that adds millions of dollars to our bottom line, which makes it really hard to stay in business and keep this going. But more importantly, for your constituents and everyone else watching today, it's going to immediately hit all of your food at the grocery store. It will hit you every time you go. And we have a saying in the transportation world is if you buy anything, it came on a truck. And we're seeing that problem at the ports now, and we can unload as many ships as we want, but it doesn't solve the problem because there's not enough trucks to get things moving and off the docks. So yes, we are really having a problem with the fuel surcharge. Today's rates, the fuel component is over 35 to 40% of any rate given to move any product. And it's really concerning.
So what percentage has it gone up, just transportation, from a year ago to today now?
So fuel is up over $1.30 per gallon, and that's approximately 35% in 1 year.
Whoa. I'm assuming you can't pass all that on, can you? I mean, but that means middle income is just paying more for any product they're getting.
Absolutely. We try and pass on everything we can, but shippers can only bear so much. They have bottom lines that they have to adhere to as well. And, we may have a route that takes us from A to B, but inevitably we'll go off route. And so if a truck was only supposed to burn 10 gallons in this route or 20 gallons in this route, but you end up burning 30 gallons in that route, that uncalled for fuel is just eaten on the bottom line of my company. And then you have all your workforce that's trying to get back and forth to work every day, who are spending so much more money just to get to the job. Very difficult.
Thank you. Yvette, you want to introduce our next guest?
I do. I'd be delighted. So our next guest is Ray Miller. He is the mayor of Artesia. Ray Miller actually grew up in Albuquerque and now is the president of Regeneration Energy Corporation, which is a small independent oil and gas production company in southeast New Mexico. Ray?
Thank you. It winds up being a thing where it's a privilege to be here, be a part of this. Certainly when I look at what's contained in the bill, I'm devastated. It winds up being a thing where our industry has so much potential here in southeast New Mexico on the edge of the Permian. And certainly, you've already mentioned the fact that we have so much federal lands as well as state lands. Private lands are actually our smaller component of the industry's opportunities in this part of the state. It winds up here, you mentioned Oklahoma had over 25% of the state's budget comes from oil and gas. In New Mexico, it's over 30%. It winds up, when I look at some of the impacts that are proposed in this, it is just truly adding cost in every way, shape, and form to our industry to be a burden to where we try to, over time, eliminate domestic production. Unfortunately, as we all realize at this point, we're going to need oil and gas and energy for years to come from non-renewable sources. And as a result, if truly our objective was to reduce emissions and to improve the climate, the domestic production has the lowest emission rates of any barrel and MCF produced around the world. It's a thing where that's so unfortunate that we attack here and then begin to import more oil other places. When I look at changes that proposed with the ONRR rules, it's frightening. Currently we have a 12.5% royalty, but already my company pays 13.55% in royalty on our largest lease simply because of the way that we're forced to calculate the royalty payments by ONRR. Even though it's an arm's length transaction, the gas company and I negotiated the best contract I could get, but ONRR doesn't allow the same deductions that I was forced to take inside the contract. It's a thing we're looking at the change in bonding, the opportunities for new people to actually have the entrepreneurial spirit to become operators will just be impacted tremendously. I worked for family organizations from 1980 to 2010. The two families started as partners in 1972 with their first lease. Had the bonding requirements that are proposed been put in place at that time, they would have never been able to enter the industry because they couldn't have afforded the bond to actually start their first or to buy their first wells. It's a sad thing because over the course of 38 years, each one of those companies became worth over $1 billion. Tremendous success at developing our industry here in southeast New Mexico, but we're trying to kill the opportunities for people to have to start in the industry, and we're also trying to kill the development of what we have in the way of tremendous potential in this basin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We also have the mayor of the town of Superior, Arizona, Mila, and she's also, though, as the executive director of the Copper Corridor Economic Development Coalition. You understand what happens with mining and others, an area that Pete Stauber works very diligently on. Mila?
Yes, thank you, Speaker McCarthy, for inviting me to participate in this hearing today. Right now, with this bill standing with the Save Oak Flats legislation attached to it, it's absolutely devastating to the community of Superior. As it is, the current administration has put a halt on what's already been a decades-long process to permit the Resolution Copper Mine, which my community and generations of miners have been waiting for this approval to go through in a record of decision. Not to mention the time that it has taken our Forest Service officials to actually process this complex document. And also part of this Save Oak Flats legislation is other critical amendments to it, the imposition of new royalties, assessing a new 8% gross royalty on new mines and 4% gross royalty on existing mines. This would essentially cripple the entire economy of the Copper Corridor of Arizona and other extraction-based economy communities across the nation. This is not a productive conversation that's going to bring the industry to any type of compromise on these things. This will essentially just put them out of business. That, along with the displaced material fees, we are completely reliant on the industry coming in and cleaning up historic mine operations. And our communities benefited from over $1 billion investment by Rio Tinto and BHP on cleanup and the investment in developing the Resolution Copper Mine. If this were to go into effect, this tax, we wouldn't even see historic mine operations cleaned up, which are critically important to the environment and longstanding communities that are connected to the extraction industries, whether you're in Arizona, Nevada, Utah, any community that is connected to mining. The Save Oak Flats bill is completely a detriment to our community. And instead of our community celebrating the next milestones of the record of decision being signed, we're here trying to communicate with the administration and Congress that we don't need the Save Oak Flats bill in this reconciliation. And for the record, I am a Democrat and I am definitely not very happy with this Save Oak Flats bill at all. So thank you for the opportunity to represent our community.
Well, thank you. And you raise a very good point. Just to protect those mines going forward, the environment and those around. But it also, when we look to the future, we don't want to be more reliant on other countries. And speaker after speaker has been saying that, from Dave Knorr. Now when you look at for our minerals and others, this is a real concern I have for our next generation. And we're watching what is happening along the ports and others. But Yvette, you've got one other guest you want to introduce?
I do. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Emmons Yates. He's the Vice President of Jalapeño Corp. They are an independent oil and gas operator since 1993. He directs Jalapeño Fields operations, analysis of drilling and investment opportunities, and financial planning. So, Emmons, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate being the opportunity to speak here, and it's really actually a positive thing to see how much information you guys are already aware of in terms of what's going on with the attacks on oil and gas. The one thing I would say that I really want to express here is a lot of what I'm seeing in these bills, and a lot of what Ray said too, is these are things that are going to raise costs. We all know that. But the real effects of them aren't going to be seen in the next 2 or 3 years. They're going to be seen down the road when my kids are trying to graduate high school, go to college. You know, one of the things that's allowed a lot of Americans to enjoy life as we have it is the abundance of cheap energy. But if you just contain that, and that's maybe the number one word that I see when I'm looking through all these proposed bills in this, all proposed parts in this, package here, is it's all about containment. What you're doing is saying we're going to need oil and gas for the next 10 or 15 years in already producing basins and things that have already been discovered. And we're going to just fence it in where you have these large companies that are already producing oil and gas. But what we're not going to do is allow people, like Ray said, with the entrepreneurial spirit, that are willing to go out there and risk a lot of capital to develop new projects. And so the minute you start producing from an oil and gas well, it's a depleting resource. You need to replace it with something else. And if we aren't setting the ground, the things in place to be able to have new projects that will replace depleted production, then what's the price of oil and gas going to be in the next few generations if their green, utopia doesn't actually happen? You look at these things, I think a number one thing that people, you almost see it happening in real time in terms of what we're headed for. Look at England right now. England is sitting on some of the best natural resources in the entire world, but they put a moratorium on fracking in there. They can't produce their own natural gas. They thought it was fine if they had all kinds of wind and solar generating what's going on, but now suddenly the wind stops blowing and the world market of natural gas is dried up. So now they're paying the equivalent of $40 an MCF of gas. Well, that's the road we're headed down. They stopped domestic production, they've contained it. And so you're talking, a price of an MCF of gas that's 7 or 8 times what we're paying in the United States. What is that going to do for all types of businesses? It's going to literally shut everything down. And so when I see these royalty rates increasing, I see the fees on things. These are things that really concern me because a lot of this stuff it's literally written by someone who's just trying to stop oil and gas from being developed. That's all it is. You're increasing costs here, and you're doing it in such a way where someone's not going to go out there and risk the capital to invest in a wildcat area or create new resources for people because it's cost prohibitive to do it. I mean, the experience that I would have, and I don't want to go on too long here, is that in New Mexico, we're quote unquote at the cutting edge of, going green. And so what we've done is we've increased our royalty rate from state lands, and we've increased the cost of producing there with the methane gas capture stuff that they're putting in. And as a small company, we've had projects that are in the pipeline for years and years, and we're about to bring them online. And we said, it doesn't make any sense to invest in New Mexico because of the costs. And so we move that capital elsewhere. And that's exactly what I see going on here with federal, with what they're doing on federal. As Yvette said, we're a checkerboard. And so if you have state lands that are cost prohibitive, now federal lands are cost prohibitive, you're going to want to invest somewhere else. And so, I view this as really hurting New Mexico, and I also view it as really hurting the future generations that are going to, quite frankly, still be relying on oil and gas, even if politicians don't realize it. So I know I've been maybe rambling a little bit, but there's a whole lot to tackle here, and none of it's good.
That was all very good. You made some really good points, especially for the future, and you use real life examples of your own investment based upon what government has done. That you're finding capital is better used someplace else, and that harms really for the future generation as well. For those who are on Zoom up there, you can't see, but we have a number of people in the press here, from the New York Post, the Daily Caller, to Breitbart, to Washington Examiner, to Fox News. I want to open it up to the press to ask us and those on the Zoom any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Just identify yourself so the Zooms will know too.
Yeah, it's Thomas Catanacci with the Daily Caller. So on that last point, Peter, that you were just mentioning, and the previous speaker too, next time Republicans get into power, how are Republicans going to assure investors that it's a safe investment to put their money into oil, gas firms when, another Democratic administration might be looming after that?
Well, you got co-equal branches, right? And much of the time, Congress through the years have relinquished their Article 1 powers. We want to bring those back in. And what we want to do is have a level playing field. So it's not just to the investor, what it really is to the masses of America, that we can be energy independent. We could produce all the above. So what happens in this aspect is the price of gasoline is cheaper. We've watched what the new administration have done, harm those families. This isn't just all Republicans. You're talking to Democrat mayors as well. But we also want to look towards the future. The minerals of coming through, where you watch China will dump and put other people out of business, and then you're more beholden to another country. But now you're watching the American government, by raising a royalty, harming our ability to produce here. We have a number of task forces. One of them is run here by Garret Graves. How do we make sure that we're able to produce, protect the environment at the same time, which we have been able to do time and again? I don't know if you want to touch on a couple topics along there.
Sure. Look, here's the thing. You've got really clear evidence in terms of what works. Let's keep in mind, this administration is only 6 or 8 months into their policies on energy right now. What we're seeing right now is a result of executive orders, as a result of policy decisions. Now with the reconciliation package, trying to come in and double and triple down on these strategies that have caused higher prices, more dependence upon Russia and China. So, part of it is going to be the fact that the market and the public is going to be screaming so loud about the failures, the flaws, the disproportionate impact on American citizens, the unleveling of the playing field that we were able to work and establish during the last administration, that I do think we're going to be able to bring some of this production back online to help address some of the errors and flaws, just because of the profound economic impact that we're going to see, that we are seeing now on American companies and American families.
Remember, if we're in the majority and we're able to pass legislation, these are executive orders, and we get an appropriation process going through, we change the law of the land. And we make a level playing field. You watch the legislation just around this table, what you have offered, Pete and others, that will enable the investments to be made, the jobs to be created, and change the course. Other questions, comments from everybody? Yes?
Houston Keith, Fox News. Do Republicans have a plan to drive down gas and power costs, and what can petroleum and energy companies do to lower consumer costs?
We do. We have a number of pieces of legislation, but I'll open it up to members because you have some individual ones you watch just within New Mexico.
Well, we did in New Mexico, and we had several sponsors, leadership sponsored the Power Act, to make it illegal, basically, for an administration to come in and prohibit drilling on public land without the consent of Congress. I introduced myself an exemption from the executive order to exempt New Mexico from the executive order because, like Emmons just mentioned, New Mexico has really led the charge in terms of green energy, and we have had some pretty solid regulations kind of leveraged against our oil and gas producers. Because of that, actually, some of those regulations are being implemented or being brought as bills to the U.S. House of Representatives from the other side of the aisle. So we could not get even our own members of Congress from New Mexico to help sponsor that, to really look at the bigger picture and see how this affects schools, jobs, economy, everything else in New Mexico. But it's not just me. I think a number of us, we've all brought.
We have I'm going to let Garret go right here. You got to put the infrastructure in, the ability to move it. We can produce it. We've proven that we can. You need reforms, NEPA and others, one that Garret goes. Just shutting down a pipeline that the president started out with set the wrong tone. It stopped 1 million jobs. we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. Our natural gas is cleaner than any place else in the world. We can not only supply America with it, lowering the price, we can supply the world and make it a safer place to be instead of beholden to Putin and others. But Garret, you want to touch a little of yours?
Look, this is an unforced error that we're experiencing right now in regard to prices. This is a simple supply and demand issue. They've come in, starting out with executive orders, putting a pause, using even entities like the Securities and Exchange Commission to force these impact on capital markets to where the energy producers can't even get access to funds in order to finance production. And so what we're seeing right now, I'll say it again, this is supply and demand. And this experiment was conducted under the Obama administration as well, where they tried to force a decrease in demand for energy by cutting off supply. What happened is we saw a barrel for barrel transition of importing from Russia for every barrel we stopped producing domestically. So again, we've been through this, we've seen this evidence. So whenever we come back into power, which we will, because of just the clear mistakes, the failures that this ideology is yielding to the American public, we are going to go back to becoming energy independent, to actually exporting energy to other countries, cleaner energy, as Leader McCarthy said. By bringing more supply online, you help to bring down prices. How is it that when the Colonial Pipeline was shut down, they were labeled as hackers or terrorists, and we saw prices spike, we saw supply issues, yet when our own president shuts down the Keystone Pipeline, that's okay? He's a hero? These policies don't make sense. They're failing to learn from the mistakes of other countries and states within the U.S. I think we've got a clear game plan on how to get things back on track with lower emissions, with lower prices, and putting Americans back to work.
I'll tell you this, I watched the president's answer. We will not ask OPEC to solve our problems. We can solve them here in America. And Mayor Noor, you're from California. You got a crane company. You watch this producing. You're watching what they're doing at Dogger Division of Oil and Gas there. And by harming production, it's a supply and demand. You're watching what's happening, not just job being lost, but the price going up.
Absolutely, that's right, Kevin. Within Kern County, California, we actually worked very, very hard, along with community partners, the oil industry, to develop a countywide EIR. And in the countywide EIR, the oil companies actually pay additional funds in order to be able to drill, but they know what the rules are going to be. And these go for offsets so that their carbon footprint becomes, net neutral. And it was working very, very well. And hundreds of millions of dollars going into Kern County to help with those issues. And then along come these problems within Kern County to shut down local production. Another thing that we all have to be cognizant of is we don't just negatively impact business and we don't just negatively impact personal finance. Government functions based on these same things. So each of the mayors that's here, they understand that within government, we have to fill up emergency vehicles. We have to buy gas and buy diesel in order to provide for police and fire and public works. We have to keep the lights on within our buildings. We have to pay for street lights at the local utility. Speaking of that, within Taft, California, right here, Kevin, we have a 3-tiered system to pay for electrical service, kilowatt hours. It goes from 26 cents a kilowatt up to over 40 cents a kilowatt. Right across the river in Bullhead City, where my other house is, it starts at about 8.4 and tops out at about 11.5. So it costs 3 times as much to turn on a light bulb in the state of California as it does there. That is all related to energy. And if people say, well, Kern County, you're an oil and gas producing county, you don't understand nor do you buy into the integration of renewables. Nothing could be further from the truth, because you know very well, Kevin, within Kern County, we're only one county in a state that has 58. We have 2.5% of the population of the state of California, and yet we produce over 50% of all the renewable power the entire state of California does. And we do it right here in Kern County, along with 75% of the oil and gas. And 10% of what we produce comes off of federal lands. When the Saudi Arabia, I'm sorry, thinking back back to 1974, when the Arab embargo took place, we as a country were about 35% dependent upon foreign sources for our oil. Right now in California, we're 70%. The Arab embargo quadrupled the price of a barrel of oil over the course of about 8 months. The same thing could happen right here in California. We have given away our security, and the costs will impact the consumer through government, through school, through consumables, and every aspect of life. And there's no getting around that.
I think it's very clear. We have a plan to bring the price down. We just need to have the majority to do it. Yes, Julie Grace.
So I was wondering, so right now, while Democrats are in control, I've heard a lot about bills that Republicans retake the majority, and since the problem is kind of immediate, are there any bipartisan proposals that anybody's been working on to kind of be able to...
Stephanie?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we haven't been brought into any of these conversations as it relates to energy policy or, how they want to address rising gas prices. I know that Republicans have offered a lot of ideas and options, proposed bills, offered amendments to legislation that's been put up, and none of them have been considered. So I think the answer to your question is no. We haven't been included in the conversation to be able to offer ideas to try to come to some bipartisan agreement.
Which is sad, because you've got, every district is made up of about 750,000 people, a little greater or later. They all have voices to be heard here. And here they're talking about spending trillions of dollars, but leaving 1/2 of America out. It's not like they have a 40-seat majority. They have a 4-seat majority. This is very close. The Senate's 50-50. Our government is designed to find compromise. I've watched Pete Stauber work this time and again, and you've tried to reach out many times to work across the aisle.
I just want to
turn your mic around.
I'm sorry. To your question, do we have opportunities? The answer is yes. And I just want to talk, the mayor, Besich of Superior, I want to talk to you about what happened with Resolution Copper. The same thing that's happened with the copper mine in northeastern Minnesota. It's the same playbook. And when they want to adapt to alternative sources of energy, the windmills, I ask them, how many pounds of copper in a windmill? There's 7,000 pounds. So if we're going to transition, you mine that copper here in the United States. It's a win-win, and we can't get them to really grasp that idea. And I have and Garret has for 2 years now I put a piece of amendment together rather that says the United States of America will not purchase critical minerals mined by child slave labor. Speaking of the Congo and the cobalt, it went down on a party line vote. I never thought that child slave labor was a partisan. We can do better than that. We don't have to human traffic and support it, because 30% of the cobalt for our electric vehicles and our the country's adaptation to alternative sources of energy is mined by child slave labor. We can do better, and we are blessed with it in this nation. And we have we're going to fight for these blue-collar, middle-class jobs, and we're going to reduce our dependency on foreign adversarial nations. Period. We have to do it for the sake and the national security of our great nation.
Look, what's going on right now? We saw this play out in Afghanistan, and let me explain. That wasn't an anomaly. Afghanistan wasn't an anomaly in the policies that we're seeing out of this administration. Afghanistan said, hey, here's what we want to do, let's just go do it. There was no thought, there was no plan, there was no strategy. It wasn't a deliberate approach on how to do it. And you saw the awful outcome. Unfortunately, we're seeing this same emotional type approach to things like energy policy, things like gas, things like the economic impact on our citizens, things like reconciliation spending and the associated inflationary impacts on Americans. That Afghanistan was not an anomaly. We are seeing the same emotional approach to issues across government with this administration.
The worst part of Afghanistan, too, we spent our money in there finding the natural resources, building the roads for it, and now China's going in. So when they shut down in America, our ability to use our own natural resources, we're going to pay another country for it.
Kevin, if I may add, USGS spent $81 million mapping minerals in Afghanistan, and it's in the hands of the Chinese and Russians right now.
Yep. Any more questions, comments? Let's go here, we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Ashley Oliver with Breitbart News. So the bills that the Democrats are fighting about right now have a lot of provisions in them that are probably murky to the American public. They don't know what's in them. If you could kind of convey to them what the most dangerous provisions are energy-wise to the American people, what specifically would you identify as some of the worst provisions in your eyes?
You want to take it?
Sure. So let's keep in mind, we're already seeing record prices of energy. They are coming in and increasing the royalty rates, increasing the cost of producing energy, a 15-fold increasing in bond requirements, forcing inspection fees that are in excess of the cost to actually do the inspections. A $10,000 per mile pipeline annual fee. In some cases, for example, for our offshore pipelines, $10,000 a mile a year. All of this adds to increased cost of producing energy. That money doesn't just appear, it is passed on to consumers. They're actually moving things, and the reason the president hasn't responded with a plan and acknowledged that prices are going to go up even higher, because that's where things are headed. They're going in a direction where we're going to see even higher prices than we're seeing today. Now, last thing is, you've seen a little bit of discussion, including a bit of a disclosure on this clean energy approach that they're trying to put together. They're trying to manipulate markets and force us in a direction of taking on things like solar and wind energy and other renewable sources that, look, have an important role in our energy future. But by manipulating markets the way that you are without having the domestic production, as Congressman Stauber noted, preventing us from mining here, without having the manufacturing facilities, all this does, as we have seen in history, it plays into the hands of Russia, makes us dependent upon them for domestic energy because we can get it cheaper, and it plays into the hands of China, making 90% of the solar panels globally, cornering the market on the rare earths and strategic minerals that they're prohibiting us from producing domestically. Incredibly harmful provisions in the bill.
So put that in perspective. Their goal here is to make it too expensive for us to produce our own natural resources. They don't complain that the price of gas is high. Literally, the White House talked about that's a good thing to help us move to a green energy. So now they want to use hardworking taxpayers' money and go move it to green energy. So when they spend that taxpayer money, they're not creating American jobs, because who controls the market to that? China. Who's going to prosper from that? China's economy is going to grow based upon taking American taxpayers' money, spending on that, and then shutting down American jobs, just that he did it with the pipeline. That is the overall concern that we have. We can be energy independent, not reliant upon other countries. We can have all the above. You just heard Dave Noor talk. Yeah, Kern County is an oil-producing county, but we produce wind and solar better than any other county in California and the top in the nation. We can do all of it. We have geothermal as well. You have nuclear, but they want to shut that down. And why in California, where they put all these mandates in, why are we paying 40% higher? Well, they're going to take that across the country. This is what this legislation does, and this is the fear. It sets the framework. So it's not just an executive order, it's now in law.
Yeah, and I'd like to just kind of dovetail on that, besides just the obvious with the regulations and that, but also within the bill is, the creation of the Climate Corps, then we've got a revisit to the Endangered Species Act, and that just plagues the industry with uncertainties. I mean, under the last administration, we did such a good job of really working together, delisting some of the species, making it easier for production to happen. In New Mexico, now we're going back. It's like Groundhog Day. We're going back now to the lesser prairie chicken. We're working with our colleagues, over in Texas, because those are some of the things hidden in the bill. There's $100 million, I think, looking at some of the, the desert mussel, the Southwest desert mussel. I mean, the prairie chicken. Those also, I think, are those intended or unintended consequences of this legislation. But the producers are paying attention, and when you have that uncertainty, these guys are true. Nobody really knows if they want to put that investment, especially when you're looking at the millions of dollars it takes to invest in oil and gas.
And if I may follow up on that, Yvette and I are freshman legislators, and you mentioned that the details of the plan are murky to the American public. The details of the plan are also murky to Congress, because we haven't been given any specifics on exactly what they want to tax or what fees they want to levy. It seems to be a moving needle, and it'd be nice if we actually knew, so we could have a conversation around why it's likely bad policy for America.
Yes,
Houston Fox News. What can American families do to prepare for the winter with rising energy costs?
Yeah. He comes from northern Minnesota. I mean, it's going to be cold.
Look at the price of natural gas. Many of our homes are heated with natural gas. 54%. I mean, that's several $100s for the year. And the median income in Minnesota's 8th district is $51,000. That's real money. They're blue collar. In northern Minnesota, we just want to put our hard hats on, our work boots, grab our lunch bucket, and work. We mine, we manufacture, and we have secured strategically the steel assets. 80% of the steel made in this great nation is because of the iron ore mined in northeastern Minnesota. Now we have the opportunity to mine critical minerals, and it's devastating. Let me tell you something to the mayor, Besich. The one company that is in the 19th year of permitting process will bring $550 million of economic activity every year to northeastern Minnesota. That is like bringing the Super Bowl every single year. These are things, strategic things that we can do. It's a win-win, and the price of oil is going to be devastating for the middle class and the blue-collar workers that I represent. And these ideas and these Republican ideas of energy dominance and mining dominance, we have it here. We do it cleaner, better than anybody, best labor standards, best environmental standards. It's here. The good Lord has blessed us, and we need to take this opportunity now.
Yeah. And I think we're so busy, this bill, they're so busy placating to special interest groups, environmentalists. Think about the seniors around the nation that are really going to have to make tough decisions on heating their home, buying food, buying their medication. There's absolutely no conversations happening, at least in the committees that I sit in, about how this really, the reality of how this impacts especially our most vulnerable and then our seniors and, like we talked earlier, the future of our country. And that's concerning to me because we're all fixing to see cold weather hit our districts, and we don't really have any answers. And you were right, it's murky to everybody, and especially murky right now, I think, to the American public.
You know, I have a great fear. You're watching everything go up in price. So you have less money. And then you have a White House that tells you to expect the price to go even higher and push legislation that's going to cause it. When people are on fixed incomes, they can't just pay more. They have to make a decision to cut something else out. The last time we had somebody in the White House that put a sweater on and told us to turn the heater down, relied upon OPEC as well. The saddest part about this is we don't have to rely on somebody else. God blessed this nation with natural resources. We care for them better than any other nation. We do it in an environmentally sound way. But if you do not produce it here, we will still consume it. So we're harming the environment by consuming it someplace else. We're creating economies for other countries instead of within America itself. That is what concerns me. But going into this winter, those who are on fixed incomes are making decisions about their food. They're going to make the decisions about what the temperature will be. We've watched the temperature change in different places from these storms to come through. You're concerned about people's health, but it doesn't have to be this way. I want to thank you all for coming, especially the members, but to Scott, to Ray, to Mila, to Erin, to Dave, and also Emmons. I appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the fight. We hear the challenge that you are. We're here fighting for you. But we appreciate you spending some time educating America on what's happening out there in real life, but also here, this doesn't have to be this way. Government should work for you and with you to make America stronger, not more dependent on others. And so I thank you and God bless to all of you.